Alright.
Alright, seems good.
Shit. Well, that's the official start of this one, alright?
We are not sponsored by Mao.
There's
As much as we
yeah,
wish
you're
we
right. Turn the thing around. I don't want them.
But we are looking for sponsorship. Mao, the
We
taste
are
of the
looking-
truth.
Alright. Well, welcome to another episode of the Juan and Keir podcast. This time we're with our friend Willy. This episode, I wanted to talk about the state versus free market and basically who's better at doing stuff and providing value for people. And much like last time, due to its success of the quiz, I have done another quiz. And this quiz is basically the top 10 GDP countries in the world are the US, China, Germany, Japan, India, UK, France, Italy, Brazil, and Canada. And I have them here listed top to bottom from most government expenditure as percentage of GDP to bottom. And you guys are going to try to guess like one by one which one which was a number one, which was a number two. I'm gonna go for the first guess. I'm gonna start with you first, and then Keir will go if you get it wrong, until one of you gets that right.
But what are we guessing again? Is it the top GDP?
Yeah, which one spends most as a percentage of which has a largest percentage of government expenditure as GDP, right?
Okay.
Like how much of a country's production is government expenditure, from the 10 countries that I mentioned that are US, China, Germany, Japan, India, UK, France, Italy, Brazil, or Canada. Okay, so let's start with you first, Willy. If you had to say which of these 10 has the largest government expenditure, what do you think it is?
Well, I don't know. My guess would be a European country. Maybe.
Okay.
I'm gonna say UK, but.
It's not the UK.
Mm,
Which one would you think? Monsieur Keir.
thinking, I'm gonna go for US. So oddball guess, but
It's not the US. That's a bad guess. More than bold, it's bad. Alright, let's just keep going.
I'm just surprised Spain is not in that top list.
But it's not a top 10 GDP. It's I know that the list is not most government spending. The list is the biggest countries, right? Spain is 18th biggest economy in the world.
Right. Yeah. Okay. How about Germany?
It's not Germany. If you get this one, we're going to number 2.
alright. Well, China.
No, it's not China. The country in the top 10 that has the largest government expenditure is France with a whopping 57% of GDP.
That pretty much checks out. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, those pensions be costing a pretty penny and you're doing that. Okay. Number 2. Which one would you think it is? Let's start
France.
with you this time.
No, I
Keir.
think
No, because they started with him for number 1.
alright. Number 2, then Germany.
It's not Germany.
The UK.
It's not the UK.
Okay. So.
Alright.
Do you need a reminder of which countries are on the list?
Italy.
Italy is number 2 with 50% of GDP being government spending.
Wow.
All right. Well, number 3. You want to try to guess?
Should I try Germany again?
You can try Germany again if you want.
Let's.
Germany is correct.
Right,
You both have
let's go.
1 point. All right. Number 4.
Let's see.
I can read you the list again. if
Yeah,
you
I'm,
want.
I'm just mulling over the
Okay.
choices. Japan.
It's not Japan at number 4. It's not Japan.
The US.
It's not the US.
China.
It's not China.
No. Come on, I need to win this one.
What other options did we have?
The options are the US, China, Germany, Japan, India, UK, France, Italy, Brazil, or Canada.
Canada.
It's not Canada at number 4. I'm just going to reveal it. It's Brazil.
All right.
Pretty large amount of government spending, 46%.
That's
All right.
surprising, honestly.
Yeah, okay. So you started that one, so I guess, right? No. What did you start? No, you started.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can try to guess number 5.
Sure. India.
It's not India. India's not... Okay. All right.
United Kingdom.
It is the UK. 2-1 to Keir.
Yeah.
Here's a loser of last quiz, so like he has something.
He has
to
some
prove.
practice,
I have,
right?
no, I
Yes.
have a vested interest this time.
Yeah, he's like he doesn't enjoy that he came out looking like the loser, so he's competitive right now.
You know, I used to work as a consultant, so part of my job was making educated guesses about stuff I have no clue about.
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
I'm kind of like.
I mean,
sad.
you're only one down. You're only one down.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 6, Keir. I guess it's your turn to guess first.
Canada.
It's Canada. Okay, 3-1, Keir. All right. So Willie, do you want me to say like which ones have already been said?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so we had France, Italy, Germany, Brazil, UK, Canada,
Okay.
and we have left Japan, China, India, and the US. Those are the 4 countries left. Number 7.
Let's go for US.
It's not the US.
China.
It's not China.
India.
It's not India. I almost don't want to give him the point.
Well, you might get a chance to steal because I just
He
forgot.
just doesn't remember the country that I mentioned a second ago.
I'm gonna have to concede because I genuinely don't remember.
It was Japan.
I'm so stumped.
42%. All right. Number 8.
Canada. No wait.
You already said
Sorry,
Canada.
no,
Fuck you. No,
China. The beer man.
It's not China.
It's US.
It's the US.
Yes.
US at number 8. 3-2. All right. Willie, your turn to guess number 9.
I'm gonna say Japan.
Japan was
So,
number 7.
right. Fuck. India.
It's not India.
China.
It's China. So our man Keir has won 4-2, and then the last one is India with 29%. So China and India, China, despite being like we associated with like large state, spends considerably less, not too much less than the U.S. to be fair, but a lot less than France. A lot less than France.
Yeah.
But I guess like what I kind of want to lead the conversation with is like I think we should relate countries like the top 7 here, like as places that like if you were gonna be born a random person in these countries, would you rather be born in the European countries that have like larger government spending, like Brazil also has larger government spending, or like China and the U.S. if you're just like random? I guess let's divide it by like top 5, right? So you can either be a random citizen in France, Italy, Germany, Brazil, UK. One of those is not like the other. Or a random citizen in Canada, Japan, United States, China, or India.
Okay. Can I choose the year where I'm born?
Yeah, 2025.
Okay, so I can choose then.
Yeah, you can't choose the year, correct? You can't choose the year you're born.
All right. Well,
You can't choose 1935 Germany.
this is kind of a hard question, right? Because if you were to be born right now, you do get to live like the last few spotlight years of the European welfare
State.
You think it's
paradise,
You think it's gonna fail? There's not gonna be a European welfare state?
I am pretty sure at some point
Okay.
we're gonna have to start having like serious discussions about where are our
The sustainability of
the
it?
sustainability of our pension system
Yeah,
and
for sure.
overall demographics.
Okay.
These
My
are-
issue
Okay,
is
so
with
we-
the list. The top 5 countries, like you're listing them off as like this is a good choice for me to choose, right? And then I heard UK, I was like, I'm out. it's not even. It's
Yeah,
not
right.
even
Okay,
objective.
this is the
It's
question.
not
Is it-
objective. at
Okay,
this
so
point.
It's
right,
like, okay,
you're-
but it's
you're
like
correct.
UK
If
is
there
it-
is like a 1% chance to be born in the UK right now, I am bailing out.
Bro, but
Like,
there's like a okay. Let's say that it's 20% chance for any of the countries. There's a 20% chance for India.
shit.
At the bottom, right? There's a 20% chance for sure, Brazil and the UK. Brazil is like, yeah, you're gonna be poor, but it's gonna be fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the food is good.
I mean, you could be like
Brazil
you could
is an
you could
overall
even
good
you could,
country to live in, I believe. Even if you are not
It's definitely better
raised
than a lot of
by
other places.
being
Yeah.
on the more wealthy families, I think you can
Mhm.
have a pretty good life.
Exactly. So would you choose the top? would you choose the countries that spend more money as percentage of their GDP? Really, that's the question I'm asking.
Okay, this is interesting.
Exactly.
It is a tough question.
Maybe counterintuitive, right? Because like
Yeah.
I did like we talked a lot about Switzerland last time, and obviously Switzerland's not a top 10 country GDP. They would have more government spending than India, but less than China. So it's interesting that they're not here, but obviously, like not all the countries in the world that have a lot of government spending are bad, and the ones that have are good, and then the opposite, right? Like Switzerland is a country that has much less government spending than the top 5 here, and they are a pretty good place to live. But like obviously in this list of the biggest economies, I think it's pretty clear that we would usually choose the top towards Europe, right? Rather than risk China or India.
Yeah, I think that is a pretty solid point to make.
But here's the thing that's interesting to me because it's like obviously like I believe that like government spending tends to be less fruitful than the free market, right? It's meant to be less efficient because like not everyone the government can't know everyone's wants or everyone's talents, and so the free market is meant to be that coordinator for what gets produced and who gets what, because we get prices set for things. Obviously, you might have a different opinion, and that's entirely the conversation that we want to have today, which is basically, do we think the free market is always better? Do we think the state is always better? Do we think that there's places one is better than the other? And I guess we can start with, should there be a state? I mean, that's a pretty simple question, but we can probably keep it short, right?
Well, yeah, I do think there needs to be some form of governmental regulation for, security, infrastructure.
Yeah, we don't have to go too deep. Like, basically, we were pro. There has like we're not anarchists, right? We're not saying
I don't think I can.
that everyone will just work together and sing kumbaya. We don't need a scary military telling us what is right and what is wrong. Okay, so I guess the next question is like, why? In what things, for example, do we think that the free market is better than others? Like, for example, would you want, like, I guess we wouldn't want the government making like art, right? Or like PlayStations. That would be a bad use of the government's time, but we could see it for like utilities. There's like some that make sense, but I don't know. Like, do you want to drive the conversation here at all?
Yeah. Well, it is my opinion after all. I don't think I hold the truth on this topic, but I do think that if we're talking extreme cases, whether you would like to have an extremely capitalistic, unregulated country as opposed to an extremely
like a Soviet Union
intervened
kind of
Soviet Union kind of country, the decision is. I mean, we're not talking about ideals, right? I think there is
we're like realities, like the systems, like we have to work with the realities that we are complicated human beings and that we're not gonna be perfect in any scenario. So yeah.
But you mean more like we're not talking about like extreme hypotheticals. We're dealing more with like grounded.
Yeah,
grounded truth. Like we're not saying like we're assuming that in the capitalist system some people are gonna abuse their workers, and we're assuming that in the Soviet system like not everyone is gonna do everything perfectly either, right? So it's like the Soviet style system, right? I'm not meaning the Soviet but like the Marxist centralized system, exactly, the centralized state system. So you would prefer like, given two extremes of like a government that has like 80% government spending, right? Something that's like basically the entire economy, or like 10-20%. You would think that 10-20% is much more preferable, kind of thing, right?
Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, I believe that when you establish, let's say, completely free market, you have many actors like performing, in favor of their interests, and most of the times these interests collide. So there is, how would you say, an equilibrium, right? Where, companies can grow extremely large, but at the end of the day, if they're not properly managed, then they can tumble like any empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with the state, with complete control of the state, you can make the point that there is nothing stopping them from eroding, like, competition and innovation and.
I do want to push back on that idea that like companies, like no matter how big, can fail later. But I want to go to
Well, if they become encrusted on the state, that is a different matter, right? So if a company becomes too big to fail, right,
Mm-hmm.
which does happen,
Yeah, and then the state won't let it fail. Is
the
kind of
state
your
won't
argument.
let it fail. But I'm against that idea. I
Okay,
do not
yeah.
agree that. I believe that even on the more dire cases, companies need to be held accountable to their decisions.
Yeah. I want to talk more about that later, but I want to get to Keir and saying like the 80-20 example. Where would you lean?
I'll probably go. I mean,
Just
both on a personal level and to keep the conversation more lively. I'm gonna go on the opposite side.
what do you think are the advantages of like the state being the one that controls most of production?
With production, usually, I feel that
And consumption, I guess you also have to.
Well,
If you control production, you're basically controlling consumption as well, because you're controlling what people can consume.
Yeah, we're talking about the scenario where you have like a planned economy.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, yeah, almost entirely. Like 80% would basically be a planned economy, right? With something like that big, but well, like yes and no, right? Because you can be like obviously like government 80% can just be like giving free money to people like UBI. That's hardly a planned economy. It's just like planned distribution of money, which is different from like getting to decide who gets what. Obviously, there's like different things the state can do. The state can give money directly to people, or they can give money directly to production, right? And so it's like the 80-20 divide that I'm saying isn't really perfect in that sense either, because you could also see 20% being like given to production instead of like like a specific thing that might not be good, like producing like a specific kind of food, and then that would be like too much government intervention probably for our tastes, even if it was a small percentage of the government expenditure. But I guess like yeah, we would have to differentiate whether we mean like what kind of government intervention we mean. But in general, like, do you trust more the state than the free market? I guess is the question, to make decisions for all of us.
I think I'll trust the state more because when it comes to this idea of the like in a centralized economy or state-driven economy, this idea that if people say that people don't want a certain type of good or like I don't know product. I mean, I think the classic example would be in the past people would say in the Soviet Union they produced like too many shoes of one size.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, like I'm not saying there are not cases or examples of where this can go wrong, but in the same way that people in a free market economy can decide and kind of influence the market, supposedly of preference, with government you can also do the same. It's just a different process. We don't, in a sense, the market in a state system is the government. Democracy, voting, elections. In a state-mandated economy, assuming it's a liberal democracy, you can actually influence like how the government acts. If we're talking of a totalitarian system, it's a different game because you definitely cannot intervene.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm assuming in these cases we're talking about idealized systems. We're not talking about totalitarian one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously we can discuss whether or not we think that state control lends itself towards authoritarianism, but we can imagine the case that the state isn't that, right? We're not taking it for granted that all states are the Soviet Union or China. I think like I want to speak into the case of China because like if you take this list for granted, you would think that it doesn't have like that much state control, but obviously China tells its companies what to do, right? So it's like they're I mean they don't spend as much money like as GDP as even the US, but they control what the companies do even if they don't own them, right? Because the Chinese government just basically tells them like, hey, you have to make this or you have to do that. Like basically the Chinese government makes companies go into debt if the company asks if the government asks it. So it's an interesting case of like China has grown a lot, right? Like whether or not they will get to have a quality of life like people in the West, remains to be seen, because obviously like a lot of people in the cities have better lives, but there's a huge urban rural divide still in China, and there's still a good amount of like living in relative poverty. So whether or not they get to be as rich as us in the long term, they have been very successful for the last 30 years. So I think it's obviously an interesting discussion whether we think that, do we think that China is doing better because of the like they're open to the free market like under Clinton, or because they've been good at like managing their companies with like that centralized decision making?
I mean, they do leverage really well the state control, right, to make the most out of their infrastructure, right, and like I don't know, I you could hardly make the point that China is still what you would understand a communist state, where they're trying to plan the economy, because at the end of the day, they respond merely to what the Western world is demanding, right? If they want to have solar cells or windmills, they don't even consume. They if you go to China, they don't use windmills in their electrical grid.
They make them, but they don't
They
use
just
them.
make them to as an export.
Yeah.
So I think the state doesn't necessarily control. It's not planning the economy. It's just giving it guidelines as to what needs to be. I mean,
Produced.
not what needs to be produced, but rather like how much. What can you do with the workers, for example? Like we're talking about social rights, like
welfare, union, labor rights, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. I think with China, it's a good example of because in this debate right now, it's like totally state side economy versus total free market. I'm not really like, obviously I'm taking the moderate position here. And I think China, if you can bar some very nasty like
Human
realities
rights
about
abuses,
it, so like human rights, government authoritarianism, not necessarily linked to the economy. Let's put that aside for now, although we shouldn't. We should keep that in mind. But China is a good example of a mixed market economy, like working well. Prior to 1970s with the détente policy between US and China, started by Nixon, China was fully communist in that sense. Yes, fully communist. Now, was it doing well in many factors or like variables that we care about nowadays? Not really. No, we can talk about the Great Leap Forward, being a disaster. Economic heavy industrialization policies being a disaster as well, because they tried to jump too far ahead of the time. They tried to create industry out of a backwards agrarian nation. It can be done, but the problem is the Chinese show that it can be done at heavy consequence.
Like work security, right?
Yeah,
workplace. What do you call these?
Workplace safety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Workplace safety.
But without the prior efforts and investment done by the Chinese government, this new China now, like this mixed market, I think some people call it hybrid capitalism or capitalism with socialist tendencies. It won't work because it'll be impossible to have such a vibrant, export focused industry and economy without all the efforts done by the government.
That came previously to like hyper industrialize.
Yeah, and I think maybe you can argue that the way they're doing it now is not the best, because I don't think the way the government is completely overreaching in every aspect of life, including the economy, is good. But to argue that the success of China now is only because of capitalistic reform, I think is quite simplistic. You have to take into account the vast evolution of China. Because if you say China became a successful economy just out of capitalist reform since the 70s, you then have to ask, why didn't it do better than it did historically in the past? You have to see why. Because if you're just saying it's capitalism,
I mean-
and in the past there'll be different reasons to why it's not performing.
You can make the point that they became an ideal place to like start industry due to the fact that they had no unions, right? The wages you have to pay employees are
Minuscule compared to.
minuscule in comparison to what you would have to pay for a laborer in the West.
Mhm.
Like,
Well, I'm kind of glad you brought up that argument, because when I was looking into like preparing for this debate, I found one IMF study found that countries with higher rates of like social rights, such as labor protections, union protections, and unionization rates, they found that not only was their economy more productive, but that people's like there was a lower level of inequality.
is it more productive by which metrics?
I mean, like GDP per capita.
I believe that was the.
I mean, that's what more productive would mean, right?
Yeah.
Because like,
I don't think
if
they
you don't adjust
necessarily
it for
meant-
population,
I don't
then-
think they necessarily meant productivity, from what I remember, because it's a bit fuzzy now. I will grant you that. But I think it was productivity in terms of like output. I don't know if necessarily that then meant GDP per capita.
I mean,
think
usually
maybe
output
in
is
some-
GDP, and I imagine.
I think when I was there saying productivity, it meant more like output wise in the industry.
Yeah, but that's what GDP measures. Like it measures like output of production
Well, fair enough.
and services.
But it can be altered by demographics also, and like if you, let's say, start importing lots of cheap labor, let's say, in Spain, for example, you have like lots of immigrants from the north of Africa and a great part of South America
Mhm.
in Central America, and most of the times these jobs are like operating under what unions and what let's say like the laws that are trying to protect the workers. These don't apply to them because they're effectively
Illegal.
out of-
Yeah,
out
they're
of-
like illegal. Basically,
Exactly.
they're out of the.
they are being paid in
Under the table.
under the
Yeah,
table,
table.
yeah. So basically, you can have like a really steep increase in your GDP, even though
Because like okay, so like
the protection that you try to establish by unionizing and by setting like these kind of laws.
yeah, I guess like if you don't count like the illegal immigrants as people to divide in the GDP per capita, then like the number's obviously going to be bigger
You
because
can-
like you're like undercounting the population. Really, okay, interesting question. But I think like it does like. I mean, I think it's especially an interesting case in a country like the U.S. when it had like such a big immigrant population, because I wonder like do they take into account the legal immigrants when they calculate GDP or not? Because if they don't, then like the number is gonna be it should be smaller than it is, right?
Well,
GDP per
maybe
capita.
I think they.
maybe I'm wrong on this one. I'm not sure if they.
Yeah, I don't know how they
account
count it. I have no
for-
idea how they count.
But
the
I would
populations.
assume they just take a
Honestly-
metric of the gross product that the country produces
Yeah, but they like per capita means.
through companies,
for the
like their income
population, right?
statements. They probably add this.
Well, yeah, no,
aggregate
the
this
the,
somehow.
the addition of like GDP itself is not the problem here, but like your point about like your point about the population and the demographics is really important, I think, because GDP per capita is literally that it's divided by the population, and if you're undercounting the population because you're not counting the immigrants, then the GDP per capita is going to be higher than it really should be, right? Because let's say that you're dividing, let's say you have a population of 100, but you have like 100 and you have let's say you have GDP per capita of 1,000, and you have 100 people, right? Then the GDP per capita would be 10, right? But if you have another 100 illegal immigrants, but you didn't count them, you just counted the original 100, like really, your GDP per capita is 50, right? And so I think undercounting, it would be interesting because I honestly don't know how the population is measured for GDP per capita
I
calculations.
think they just take official census figures.
Well, yeah, which you would assume that.
It's also because
Oh, but I guess like illegal immigrants are counted in the census, no?
I don't think they are.
Oh, no idea.
But even if they're not counted, that's even worse because they're producing for the economy and yet they're not being counted in.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So
I agree with I agree with the sentiment, and I do believe that nowadays there have been more efforts to try and include estimates of like overall like economic growth, productivity, standards of living. They try and incorporate like what's usually seen as the underground economy. So like people who are unofficially working, people who in this case are unofficially living in. I think the problem is, as much as it's of interest to know these statistics and how it impacts, it might just be too confusing to try and take into account
Yeah,
without having official tools. Because otherwise, you can do estimates, but then if you're just doing estimates, then it's kind of undercutting the idea that you're using official.
Yeah,
I know what you mean, though.
But let's try to get a little bit more to this discussion. Like, interesting
then
that
again, migrant population is normally not even well. Let's say it could offset your measures by like maybe 10%.
Yeah, not much more than that. I mean, it's like 10%.
Depends on which
little,
country,
but
right? Like the UK, for example, right now is well, I'm not sure which
I have no idea.
percentage of migrant population do they have.
I generally don't know.
Mhm.
But I kind of want to get back to like this discussion of like that workers are more productive like when they're free. And I think there's like a thing that I read in like about like free workers in the U.S. at the time of slavery were more productive than the slaves, right? And like just like as farmhands or anything. And I think that like obviously like this is because they're working for themselves naturally. Like the slaves are like working to not be punished. Basically, they're not really working for their own benefit, and obviously there's gonna be some sort of lethargy in that you don't really like. You're not gonna see any benefits from your work, right? But obviously for the person, you don't. For the owner, you don't like for the master, you don't pay them a wage. So even if they're less productive than a worker, you're paying them much. You're paying them zero.
Yeah.
So it's like it's beneficial for the owner anyways.
I don't know if this is kind of a dark thought or observation, but could there be another reason as to why free workers in the US would be more productive than slaves? And I think the reason is they have no guarantees of protection. And what I mean by this is if you go around, like what are the common punishments of the time for slave workers if they misbehave?
Getting flaunted.
Whipping.
Flogged, whipped, castrated, branded, and in many cases having to wear cruel like collars. That will directly impact your like ability to perform as much as it's cynical. Whereas
You're extremely motivated for all the wrong reasons.
well, you
But
can
the
say
thing, I
you can say
really
you'd
don't
be,
feel like they would be extremely motivated. I don't know, like.
but it's in a sense like, but if you have two people, right? Take two people at random and then put them to some physical job. And then one of them is consistently like, let's say, well fed, well rested. They have no like reason to fear like excessive punishment. They will flourish. Like hopefully they will flourish, right? If you have someone who's like beaten into submission, is malnourished, and in some cases like not as much in the US, but like in the Belgian Congo, punishment for some slaves was amputation. Obviously, that's going to impact your output.
Okay, yeah, I feel like we can definitely also extend this to the example of like better benefits for workers, because if you have better benefits like healthcare, you're gonna be like, but obviously there's a difference.
So that's what I was
Yeah.
going for a very extreme example.
Yeah, obviously, but like I can extend this to your example in the case that like, for example, let's say that you can't get healthcare in the U.S. and you're someone who moves furniture, right? It's like that's gonna impact your job, even if like slave or no slave, right? And so like if you get healthcare in your country and you're someone who does physical labor, then you're gonna be able to be more productive than in the case that if you don't get these benefits. And I think so. That's like, to me, it makes sense. Like with like these studies that I saw about the productivity of slaves versus non-slaves, is that in general maybe motivation doesn't have as much to do with it, but like
it could be there, but I think
we need to discuss what kind of work are we talking about. Like,
well, this was more
because
menial labor back in the day when there was slavery, right?
I believe, like as you said, physical work probably isn't that much influenced by your motivation, or well,
maybe
the motivation to keep your arms and legs. But like, if you're deeping into more intellectual types of jobs, right? Where you need to think of how to solve problems. Motivation plays pretty.
Yeah, big role. I get because it's like, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I'm. It feels like you're kind of trying to defeat your own point that
No,
like
I-
that workers that have like more benefits are like, because I think
my
I would
point
agree
is,
with you.
my point is people with more benefits are able
Work
to-
better or more productive.
Yeah, more
Yeah, I
productive.
agree. Like I think
That's the
it's
point.
kind of
I'm
what
making.
Willie's saying here about the motivation of like intellectual workers. Like if you like, obviously like you can have the benefit. Obviously, you have different benefits, right? You have like stability benefits, like in a government, and you have like incentive benefits, like in a capitalist system, right? And so these two aren't like the same, but like obviously they can help in some senses. Maybe like for intellectual tasks, like incentive benefits work better, could be the case. In the case of more menial and repetitive tasks, just like quality of life benefits work better. It would be interesting to see because obviously we have no fucking clue. I mean, I've not seen anything today, but I would be interesting to like unless you have seen something about like the differentiation between these two things. But man,
Like
sounds very specific.
Nothing that comes to mind.
But yeah, but I think to me in general, I think that I would agree with you that obviously there's a lot of like service-based workers. Like if you're someone that is a truck driver and you're not getting enough sleep, or you're like driving for too long, it makes sense that you could be more accident prone, and that could, in the long term, be worse for your ability to do your job. Obviously, in the short term, you would get more hours done, but in the long term, it could make it not sustainable.
I think actually now with the mention of like intellectual, like more intellectual, I think maybe cerebral work would be more. I don't know. I'm nitpicking. Anyways. with more intellectual.
Office work.
Let's just office. I think you could also go back to the point of like productivity still being linked, because in the end of the day, like the body does influence how the mind works.
That's
in many
true.
ways. And
Yeah, and how healthy you eat, like also impacts like how well your brain
so
operates.
I think from what I remember once, there's an estimate that 1 in 5 people on the globe is like mentally depressed, and they say that the economic losses due to mental illness, I believe, is around $600 billion per year.
I mean, doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
So I think in going back to the overall point, not about motivation, but just about quality of life, it can also impact other.
Yeah, quality of life can definitely also impact. Yeah, because if you're just like a depressed person in an office job, then yeah.
It's just because of the intellectual part. It just
I think it's
sparks
interesting.
something here.
Let's try to get more back to like the root of the debate. I think like, I mean, at least I'm happy with your argument that like well-paid worker, like a motivated worker. Obviously, like I don't think that necessarily means that the government has to be the one that's giving these benefits. You could argue that like corporations could also be doing this. Obviously, like corporations and the people in them, like they're
I completely agree with the point made. Like motivated workers, either by economic incentives or otherwise, are gonna perform better. That's no doubt. To me, the debate is more on whether the state does a better job at
motivating or keeping people healthy, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think it's interesting to say because like if you look at the case of the U.S. and their lack of like state like federal healthcare programs / rules, because like because in the case of Switzerland that we talked about last time, and we've talked about this together, you have like mandated healthcare that's corporate run, it's not state run, but the state does regulate it, right? In the case of the U.S., there's not much regulation, and it's also not state run, and the outcomes are horrible, right?
Yeah.
So it's like interesting case. Like health in Spain, it's interesting because like like very small stuff, you basically have to wait 3 months, so you basically don't get checked for it. And then like, but things that are really bad, you do get it like very well taken care of here. So I think in that sense, like is the state, but like you could say that health outcomes in Switzerland, and we would have to look at the data more granularly. But I mean, it would make sense to me that health outcomes in Switzerland are pretty good.
I am pretty sure they are.
I think
Yeah.
Like you could make the point. Well, you're paying for at least 200 francs for a monthly healthcare insurance, but I'm pretty sure the services they're getting provided are orders of magnitude better than what we can get here.
You'd say so? Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I've had the luck to not have injuries in
And
Switzerland.
I
So.
think that you can make the point that even if that weren't the case, you can still choose what private insurance you want to
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
pay, right? So if you're not happy with the service you're getting from one of the companies, you can just move to another.
Yeah.
And that inherently is going to make companies kind of like struggle with each other.
But
Well,
then
you would
provide a
think
better
that,
service.
but then the U.S. would be kind of like the cartelization of that, right? Because like,
Actually, I was gonna.
yeah, because the U.S. is just like a cartel about like all the companies being like, oh no, we're all gonna deny this amount, and so like we all win more money.
Okay, but then you need to argue that the state needs to set
Regulations.
regulations.
Yeah,
with-
if they're not
and
giving the money, they're
with
at least doing
regards
the
to
regulation.
competitiveness, right?
Mhm.
So you cannot just like make an oligopoly where you fix prices for EpiPen and.
Yeah, and obviously that's, but yeah, obviously that's that would be at the end of the day an argument
I mean,
against
even
I am then again saying if we're going to the extremes, obviously the outcome is terrible either way. I believe there is a balance. You need to have some state regulation, but not
Yeah.
intervention.
Oh, you would be more like you like the Swiss model more like regulation, like well done public policy, but not necessarily the state spending the money,
but
stuff like that.
at the risk of sounding pedantic, isn't the fact that isn't regulation a form of intervention?
That's true.
Well, it depends on how much freedom you give people, right? So if you're just saying, hey, you need some healthcare, right? You cannot just live without healthcare. You need to get something. I'm not saying you need to pay me to provide you healthcare, or otherwise I'm going to put you in jail.
Mm-hmm.
That's intervention.
But I think I also agree that there's like obviously I'm not gonna say that regulation is not intervention, but it is like less intervention because like how much money I give, like let's say we're in a single payer system,
Right.
like how much money I give the doctors or stuff like that is already a limiting factor that like on like what I do in the economy. Whilst like if I just have regulations on what the rules are and you can't overcharge like this amount or you can't do whatever. Again, I haven't read the case of the regulations in Switzerland or countries that do this, but like you're just like saying like no, these are the rules, and then you have capitalism do its magic. But obviously, if like I pay doctors like 30k euros like a year, like I'm having a limiter on how many people want to even be doctors, right? Because it's like the salaries are poor.
Did you hear about this? Well, it's not local news. Maybe it's not that relevant, but they are offering doctors in Valdemoro, which is a town close by. They're offering them housing, free housing, for them to come to work to the hospitals, because the let's say the town hall cannot pay them more, but they do have some like surplus of housing, so they just offer that.
That makes sense.
Hey,
I mean, I don't know why you just don't
And
sell the
it's-
land.
it's really-
I guess
it's
the
really
land
sad
was like
because
worth zero.
These
Could be true, yeah.
most doctors nowadays, they would rather just go and work at other countries like Germany or
Yeah, yeah. We have again our good friend Unai, friend of the podcast, previous guest of the podcast. But yeah, 100%. I definitely think that obviously like some state intervention is required, but to what extent is it preferable is definitely another question in that case. And I think that it's a good discussion that obviously like the statewide thing makes it so that more people have access to it, but then the quality of care maybe isn't as bad, right? Because the U.S. has really good hospitals if you're stinking rich, right? If you're like really
you're gonna
really
get
rich,
treated for cancer, you probably want to go there. Yeah.
I think it's not that bad here, but to be honest, but like I'm saying that like in general the U.S. It's not like it doesn't have good healthcare; it just has like poor distribution of who has access to good healthcare, right? And so in that sense, like that's perhaps an unfair problem and can lead to other things. And obviously, the channel's about inequality and how that creates social problems. So I'm very willing to hear these arguments that it creates social problems that make people angry. Case in point, Luigi Mangione last year, took matters into his own hands. Okay, I guess let's keep talking about like maybe I want to talk a little bit about like why I think that in general the market is better, but like maybe in the future it might not be as much so, because like I think the problem of the government, centralized governments, the number one problem is information, right? They don't know what people can do. They don't know what people want because they don't know all these people, right?
They
And this was even more true before, right? But it's really like the reason why capitalism works well is because I know everything I want and I know everything I can do. And so like I trade with people who know what they can do and what they want, right? But in the case of like socialism or like of like government controlled economies, centralized economies, like they just tell me, no, you do this and you get this, and it's like I might not want that or I might not be able to do that, right? And but I think with more and more data these days, maybe governments could be better at monitoring what people's needs are by like obviously this would be like a basically like a complete monitoring system that would destroy privacy. So I'm not saying I'm like, but let's forget let's forget the privacy rights.
Only
I
if we
don't think I
limit
agree on
ourselves.
this.
But let's forget the privacy rights. But I think that better technology. I don't think we should forget them for like whether we want this society or not. But for the case of production in itself, just for production.
I get
Like-
what it means, but it's obviously
like-
horrible.
Yeah, it would be a horrible world to live in. But like, would we like is centralized economies getting better because we have more data on what people can do and on people in general?
I mean,
I don't think this is the case, and I want to make the point that I think governments are really good at giving directives on
Mhm.
how to act on, like regulate the market dynamics, but not providing the services themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because governments have this tendency for having no accountability. They have no incentives to, because since the government is providing the services, then you have nowhere else to go. It's like you have to get it, either it's good or bad. And the public services are always going to be funded because they're needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this system where the services are provided by the state is always going to basically underperform because people have no incentives to do better. As otherwise, private companies have the incentive because if they do not offer good services, they're going to disappear.
Well, obviously, like the
but
counter
not,
argument,
not,
like,
but
could
not
be-
necessarily good services, only profitable services.
Well, yeah, then the question is, who is your customer, right? The problem with countries like the US is that the customer is not the one who buys the product or hires the service. The client really are the shareholders. And that's literally by law, right?
Yeah, like
Well,
You can-
It's not the
you can get
client,
sued if
but
you
it's
not
the.
provide shareholder value.
but in the past you
I
would
wouldn't
say
use that nomenclature, but
in
like,
the past you would say the customer is king, right?
Yeah.
Now it's the shareholder.
The
is king.
shareholder is king.
yeah, obviously, like, yeah, exactly. Like, in the case of the U.S.
There is no such thing as a fiduciary duty for consumers.
Yeah.
As much as I wish there were. But
This is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and is I think that the differentiation in rates between income taxes and capital gains taxes has created a perverse incentive where people would rather just sell their stocks because it's fewer taxes, basically everywhere.
What do you mean?
Tax rates for capital gains are lower almost everywhere than they are for income, right? So like if if I'm a CEO making 500K a year, I pay 37% of that federally, and that would be that would be a big chunk. If I got paid with 500,000 worth of stock, I would pay 20% on that, right? When I sold it. And so like the perverse incentive there is that I don't want to be paid in money that comes from revenue. I want to be paid by selling my stock, right? And so I think that leads itself to what you said, like shareholder are the most important thing, because obviously people prefer to have stock because you get more money that the government doesn't take from selling stock. And to me, I think that the differentiation between income and capital gains has led to this has led to this perverse incentive because you're not trying to get more revenue. You're just trying to inflate your stock price.
Well, yeah,
so
obviously.
you can sell it.
Obviously, companies have like stock buybacks, right? And it's like eating junk food. It's not doing any good to your company. It's artificially inflating its value. But at the end of the day, even if free markets have inefficiencies, they tend to correct. So at the end of the day,
I'm going to heavily disagree with that. On the subject of inefficiencies, do you mean like externalities?
what I mean is maybe there is a surplus of people trying to rent, right? Like buy homes to rent,
Okay, so
or
there's an
buy
inequilibrium.
houses
There's an
to sell them
inequilibrium.
at a higher
Okay.
price. At the end of the day, someone's going to realize this is not worth it, and they're not going to pay for it, and this will basically propagate.
Maybe we're talking about, I think, because you're talking about an inequilibrium like supply and demand.
Yeah.
I was talking about externalities.
Yeah, like
negative.
pollution.
Well, pollution is the biggest one we have nowadays. I think to like such an extent. I think some leading economists said it's the biggest externality ever because of the scale of it. I was going to talk of a different kind of problem or externality, might we say. I was going to say slavery. In no single market or system or government that I know of or country has slavery been abolished by the free market. It has been done by government intervention. And when I say by this is a lot of problems that arise from
people don't willingly choose to like free their slaves. It's always someone tells them.
Slavery might be an extreme example.
That's where I think government is necessary. You need some directives, like people need to be free, people need to,
But this is the thing with my problem with I feel like I was pegged incorrectly in the state economy. That wasn't my position. I was mixed market. I'm not against.
But you definitely lean more towards
I can
the
lean
state.
more, but
That at no point did I say, do you want the Soviet Union brought back?
Worse in my mouth, man.
He's trying
Can
to,
you say to camera, I never said I want the Soviet Union to come back, and they can just shut it and cut it. Like, I want the Soviet Union to come. You know what I mean?
Wait, you want me to say I don't want it to come?
No, you have to say I never said.
I never said.
And I want the Soviet Union, and then I can just cut it perfectly.
And
you see like Scooby-Doo, where it's like, you're just trying to get me to say like something incriminating, like Coolsville sucks, and it's like Coolsville sucks,
I think you said before, like the capitalist side of the free market, they're better at providing services, right?
Yeah.
I think to an extent, I do believe there is some idea of truth to that. I think in many cases, because with like all governments in the world, no matter how perfect they are, have problems. They're sometimes inefficient. Bureaucracy, I mean, God forbid. Corruption.
Among others.
But it can cut both ways. But I think with the free market, it's slightly more agile. It's not constrained necessarily by the limits of government, bureaucracy, directives. But that's the only thing I think I can give them credit for. When it comes to like all the other parts of it, I don't trust the free market at all to regulate itself. Because historically, it doesn't seem to ever regulate itself in terms of problems that arise from their activities, which then impact us. Climate change, I mean, nobody was ever going to do anything about that, at least from the free market. It's only been governments that are doing it. Because a lot of times the free market is willing to just turn a blind eye to problems they've created because they know somebody else will have to deal with it. That's why I'm the mixed market, because otherwise, I mean, slavery. Adam Smith advocated against slavery, but not for moral reasons. He just said it was an inefficient form of production. I don't know. Is it unfair to say, like, generalize that? Yes,
bro.
I'm
Stop slavery because, like, I want more burgers. I want more burgers, so stop having slaves, please. Goddamn.
Child labor laws, at least in the Victorian era, fiercely fought against by industrialists because they said it's going to kill the industry. Obviously, it didn't, but only the government was willing to step up to do that.
Yeah, I agree. You do need government to regulate like certain dynamics in society. I'm not against that. honestly.
Yeah.
And it's
just wanted to say that.
it's a hill I'm not willing to die on, honestly. But
Yeah.
you need to make the point, like, where does government intervention stop being about improving people's quality of life, and it's just starting to spiral out of control into
Sure, I mean, there's a perfect
Into
middle.
control and liberalism. Right. I wanted to push back on something you said about government having no accountability. Like in the case that we assume a democratic system, the accountability should just be the election, right? Like you can argue that in the U.S.,
sorry,
but that's what it should be, right?
it should be.
It should be the
But
vote, right? And you would say like Elon and Trump were saying that they were given a mandate by the people to like do Doge, right? They were given this mandate. This is what they argued, right? Regardless of whether or not it's like oh, we're spending too much money in government, we need to lessen government, and so they fired a bunch of people, and so
I guess it really.
that's the people, that's the accountability of the system, because like they, whether correctly or not, they viewed the Biden administration and the system as it was before as overreaching, and then there was this change that came.
It really comes down to how do you do government, right?
Well, yeah,
Switzerland, as an example, they had this motion passed recently. They wanted to buy warplanes from the U.S., right?
mm-hmm.
And the U.S. just decided at some point that they wanted to raise the price of the jets, right? And the Swiss weren't happy about this. So what they did is they set up a referendum on whether they wanted to still buy the planes or push back, right?
You mean renege on the deal?
How do you say appeal deal? Well,
I think renege. Is like
Yeah,
just saying,
renege.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like they just like
anyways,
not do it.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
go back in it.
No, go
so
forward.
you have, as a Swiss citizen, the possibility to push back against laws that are against the interests of your country, even if the politicians want to pass them. So this
So
is
there was a referendum made for the people to vote on.
yes,
Oh wow.
exactly. You can push back against legislation that you deem is not in the best interest of your country, which is, frankly, it is a power where you need to be informed about the decisions being made, and
Yeah,
but
democracy is only as good as the education of all the people.
exactly. But then again, the Swiss are one of the most educated
Yeah, exactly.
societies there is. This is not the case of Spain, right? We have democracies where we have
It's all relative, right? We are one of the most educated societies in the world, just not in Europe.
we see politics as a football match. We really don't care
Bro,
what
it's
legislative.
the same everywhere
I
else
think
except Europe,
as-
and
as-
it's the
as-
same
yeah.
fucking same, bro.
And this
But I get you.
This
I
is
get
an
you.
issue. Like, people really don't care, and this is the perfect environment
But
for.
I do think people care.
shady-
like if you
shady
see
politicians to-
the rise of Vox like throughout this year, like Vox has had a gigantic rise in the polls in Spain. We are getting the accountability of the system not working as well by people going to a party that is not the one incumbent.
Well, I feel like even though social media makes you think that there is this backlash against.
But no, wasn't like the polls that Vox was like almost as big in popularity as the BP now?
Yes, yes.
Close to getting to
there,
second largest.
there are lots of polls, and most of the times, like they're based on good demographic studies, but this doesn't always translate.
You don't believe the polls, is what I'm hearing.
No. I believe the polls.
Okay.
I'm just saying that I don't believe the government counting the votes. Or
Well, you think that we don't live in a free democracy?
no, well, we live in a free democracy, but there's always certain things that you can do to, like, you know,
I don't know.
you can put a little bit of weight on the balance, right? Let's say, let's talk about mail vote, right?
I think we might be diverting a bit.
Yeah,
from the
but
topic.
sure. Well, let's see what this is going.
So, you know that you can choose whether you want
To vote for mail.
certain areas for their mail vote to be processed first. You know, it all comes down to the logistics of it. If you're just like if you're literally just fighting between, you know, winning or losing by a couple thousands of votes, these kind of logistic maneuvers can turn
Like
the
who
tides
gets who gets access to mail-in voting, who doesn't, is what you mean? Because I don't
exactly.
think counting shouldn't matter, but obviously like access of different like ID laws and stuff like that,
The
or
problem-
something that change who votes.
The problem is who counts the votes. Who owns the companies that count the votes? How do they count the votes?
This is sounding quite conspiratorial. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I thought in Spain, ballot counting was done by
The regions?
no paneles.
Indra.
No,
By-
but what happened? Was it that the people do when they're collecting the votes in like town halls? I don't know, la mesa.
So they're supposed. No, I'm not talking about in-person voting. I'm talking specifically about mail voting.
Oh, but somebody else. I mean, there's an equivalent somewhere else with mail voting. It's not panel popular. I think
Okay.
it's not like by anyway.
So you're really just basically saying that we don't live in a perfect democracy. So this is the argument.
There is
right?
no such thing.
Well, there is no such thing as
perfect
But you don't
democracies.
believe that. You believe that the government itself has systems in place to avoid things being changed through democratic
I
means.
feel the government has systems in place to tilt a bit
The
results in their favor. I'm not saying they can pull a Venezuela, okay? I'm not saying that.
Maybe. Who knows? But I don't know. In general, I think that, I mean, obviously, let's see what happens in the next Spanish elections. But I do think that there is accountability. I also wanted to get back to the topic of conversation about when you mentioned at the start that, like, when companies, even if they're too big, like, if they fail to produce, then, like, they will, like, go bankrupt and, like, lose their power. I kind of wanted to push a bit against that in the sense that I believe that when companies get too big, you just start to be able to purchase like all your competitors. Like it doesn't matter like how good your product is. And I would really like point to the cases of like the big tech companies in the US. I feel like whenever they see a competitor rise, it's like, well, I'm just gonna purchase you. And it's like, well, it's like
right, they purchase it, and do they keep the good practices or do they just turn the company to shit? Because in that case, people eventually notice.
Regardless, like that, you could definitely say that a lot of people like don't like. For example, a lot of people don't like the Gemini recommendations in Google. I mean, I'm fine with them, but some people are like, oh, this is just like worse, or the started was worse. Like people don't care about that. But the thing is that in general, like if you become the only place that owns like the production that people consume, then basically like consumers don't have a choice, right? It's like they're so like YouTube is almost basically a monopoly. Like for example, like there's not really.
They're actually, I think they're investigating Google again.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, Google gets investigated for monopoly correctly
this time
every half a year.
They've already been sentenced as a.
They have.
Yeah, they already were sentenced as a monopoly in both in the EU and the US. I think the US they just like settled or something, but Lena Khan was doing her damnedest to win that. But
at the end of the day, companies can get to these situations partly because they have the, how would you say, the active collaboration of government. You know.
Well, obviously, in some sense, you have to have at least if not the collaboration, the turning a blind eye of it, right? Because I want to speak about like when Standard Oil was too powerful in the U.S., it was broken down by the FCC. I don't know what the name of.
That was under Teddy Roosevelt. I don't think it existed back then.
Well, it got broken down by the government, right? Basically, they owned a large percentage of oil production in the U.S. and it's like well, basically setting prices for everyone. You're like getting way too much power, and you're basically becoming a monopoly. So have to break you down. And obviously, like I'm sure you would agree that monopolies are bad,
yeah, of course.
right? But I definitely think that that's obviously like something that I personally believe that capitalism tends towards monopolies without government intervention, because I think that in general, like if like a company doing slightly better with compound interest over time just means that they're gonna grow faster and faster because of the way that compound interest works in the general, like in the exponential growth of things. As long as like obviously you have to maintain the advantage all the way through, but even a small advantage can be enough to like become the best. And this is the thing, like obviously like it's not that how do you say, it's not that you like it's easy to become a monopoly. I don't think it's easy. Yeah, I don't think it's easy.
I don't think it's easy at all.
But that's what I'm saying. But I think that in the long term, capitalism tends towards that. Obviously, I don't think that companies become monopolies very quickly, except for like the case of social media at the start, because there was just like so much.
The founding
Like there was basically no other option. Like YouTube came on its own, and then Vimeo was like 4 years later, and it's like too late. Adoption was already in.
the founding father of like I think modern economic thought, but especially capitalism, Adam Smith.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote specifically, like if there's one thing he warned against primarily, it was monopolies, and he said, despite the fact he was talking about a very different time set on the economic world, he still said there is some need, even in a free market, for the government to step in, to intervene and break up any monopolies, because he said it's like a natural tendency to take place, and the effects they can cause are ruinous, so they have to be. I always thought weird, like a lot of people will espouse Adam Smith's ideas, but then they kind of brush under some of the more.
I think like most capitalists will be
inconvenient.
anti-monopolies, but they won't think that it's a natural occasion. Like some people will say like, oh no, it's like basically this is basically the conversation between inclusive and exclusive markets. Basically, an inclusive market is that it's easy to participate in, right? It's like I can quickly set up a business
So like low barriers to
and
entry.
do this, and obviously like the government can be something that makes a government something exclusive. For example, like in the case of Mexico, they gave Carlos Slim like. The government basically gave him a monopoly on like what was it like some sort of real
But
estate.
you don't need to be
What's
that
that?
rampant about it. It's not even that hard. Government can just literally raise taxes, raise how would you call it? The money you have to pay to hire a worker, and you're suddenly making big companies say like, I don't care, I can pay for it, and it's even good for me because I can just make all of these smaller companies that cannot afford this to just
Yeah,
go
I
away.
agree. Like regulation does help bigger companies because you can pay for lawyers and stuff like that smaller companies and startups can't do.
Yeah.
And so like obviously like some regulation I don't want.
Let's say
I don't want fucking companies polluting my water. Definitely not. I'd rather have a big company control it and not have polluted water than have anyone be able to pollute water, you know. But obviously in general like it does regulation does make markets more exclusive, right? But obviously, I think that another thing that makes markets exclusive is basically like Amazon practices, which is like price setting because you control such a large percentage of like distribution where it's just like, oh, you want to compete with me? I'm just going to make a loss for 5 years. And it's like, bruh. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, so in that sense, like Amazon is almost basically a monopoly, like in fast delivery for stuff. Not a I mean, you don't have to have 100% to be a monopoly. I mean, that's the meaning of the word.
There's a
But
fun
like-
fact, there is no Amazon in Switzerland.
Really?
Yeah, they
They
buy.
just banned it?
No, they didn't ban it. They just Amazon realized it's not profitable for them to operate.
Why wouldn't it be
Country.
profitable? Oh, because
No idea, honestly. But
that seems weird, man.
they
Maybe they must outsource.
they have these platform called Galaxus, which is
What do you mean I
similar.
can't get my stuff the same afternoon? What do you mean
They
I
have to,
can't Prime?
they literally go to southern Germany to buy everything. You know, it's also cheaper though.
Yeah.
This is a country that is like really small, surrounded by many countries with, like high levels of infrastructure. One of the most profitable companies in the world is somehow saying it's not profitable for them to deliver.
I have no
I think
clue.
either,
Yeah, we would have to see.
either they're not being very like creative with their
Or maybe like the
deliveries.
Swiss company is just good at what it does as well. Like I don't know, but I think like the case of like
It was just a random.
and
fact I
also
wanted to-
the Swiss also have like a bigger purchasing power. So maybe like the low prices wasn't as much of a draw as it would have been in less rich countries, right? But like in the case of Amazon, it's true that they were doing this very anti-competitive stuff, and now basically like most sellers have to go through Amazon and have to negotiate through Amazon, and most buyers buy through Amazon. And so like I think that Amazon is a good example of like how companies can do these exclusive markets. Obviously, the government can do an exclusive market with writing a word, right? They could just write law that
as opposed
makes...
to a company needing to accumulate enough capital
Yeah, exactly.
without screwing up, right?
No, obviously, like it's easier to make rapid change in government because you can just change the rules of the game. It's like you're playing Monopoly, and it's like, well, let me change the rule that if you land in one of my spaces but not one of yours, you give me $1 million. you know,
Oh, and
you know what I mean?
also
Like, just change the rules.
I wanted to make the point that bigger companies are more prone to, they're more vulnerable to market disruptions, right? Think about the case of Kodak, for example. You know, Kodak,
The camera.
photographs,
Yeah.
and cameras. The smartphone came up, and all of a sudden you have like a multi-million-dollar business just.
Yeah, like
Poof.
Blockbuster as well, yeah.
And these obviously is under like free market conditions. Let's say if Kodak's CEO
But
had
was-
an
was
uncle in
Kodak-
government, then
was-
maybe
Was Kodak ever
they could have
that
banned
big, right?
they could have banned iPhones.
It was
you know?
it was pretty big.
But was Kodak ever that big in comparison to like Amazon?
Well,
That's what I'm saying. Like, because I know it's a big company. Like, right?
it
I have
was-
Kodak cameras.
it
but,
was
like,
back in the day. Like
were they a monopoly? Like, because the thing with Kodak is that it's like their heyday was kind of before our time, right? Like when we were young, we still had Kodak cameras, right? But like that quickly stopped happening because we had like Canon come in. We had like the digital cameras because they were the what kind of what
no,
like,
they were
cameras?
holding up. Kodak was holding up fine until the smartphone came up.
Okay.
It was one of these, meteor makes dinosaurs disappear event.
I did
Yeah.
hear. I don't know if it must be some anecdote. I don't know if it's true or not. But I heard that someone at Kodak had developed like a digital camera. It's like, oh guys, like I came up with this like groundbreaking idea. It's like it's gonna revolutionize the camera industry. His boss is like, what are you doing? Like you dumbass, like slapping him in the face. You're gonna kill us. It's like, yeah, because Kodak's specialty was selling film and not necessarily cameras. But if they had played smart, they could have just avoided their downfall.
Yeah, but it's like obviously
Again,
then
this is
like
an
the
anecdotal
biggest
conversation.
camera market is the phone market these days as well. So it's like
No, the
honestly,
smartphone like
it's like,
disrupted
it's
so
like,
many
I mean the
businesses.
smartphone like it just does so much. And honestly, like
On a
life
unrelated,
before the smartphone was. I mean, like we already had the BlackBerry, the like when I was like 5, so the BlackBerry could already do like a bunch of stuff. Honestly, could play Snake,
Yeah, but
could play Brick Breaker.
like they just perfected the
But
formula.
yeah, no, yeah, 100%. Like in general, like the smartphone just is probably one of the most life altering inventions of the.
Well,
actually, linked to that statement, there is one massive change after the smartphone as more people had, as it was more accessible for people to have high quality cameras that you could take anywhere, i.e. smartphones and like digital cameras, the amount of photos of UFO sightings decreased. I don't know why, but
The aliens were like, "Oh, grab! They got good cameras now. We gotta run."
it turns out who knew cameras can stop aliens.
But
I'm not
it's
what I'm
interesting
saying
that
is
disruption.
maybe 10 years from now, people figure out how to just
But you know what? It's like
someone figures out a business model that just wipes Amazon.
But you know what's
And it's
crazy
so much
to me?
of a
It's
big
like
company
how
that
much time have we been recording?
I don't know. Can you read there? Okay, sorry. We just like saw the time, and we've been going on for such a long time. This is what happens when I don't have my phone with me. Like,
This is what happens when our
then when
gracious
the
guest-
beers have made us like teleport through time. But yeah, I guess like
I'm not
I
saying
do
I'm
I do think that like that private industry is more willing to change from this thing. But like I want to like the case of Meta, where like they're a company that was only a social media, and now they do Oculus. They do, and they're one of the bigger players in AI, just because they had so much capital that they could like go into these new industries. You know?
I used to be such a big fan of the Oculus project. I went to all the conventions, bought the development kits even,
Mhm.
and the time that Facebook bought the company, I really noticed the shitification. It's honestly a phenomenon. That I do agree. Free market has lots of caveats and inefficiencies, but at the same time, the alternative I feel like basically thwarts your options. Right?
Yeah, I agree that government like I would say that they do have accountability, but the accountability is a lot slower than the accountability for companies, because accountability for companies is like less revenue, in the short term. Whilst governments, you can wait like 4 years for the next election, or you can wait, and even then that might not change it, right?
Normally,
Like,
if you don't have like populist, hyper
exactly. Like,
divided
you know, like,
societies, then
taking
they can-
away the politics, all getting fucked. But but yeah, I guess we're going way too long. We should end it there. I think there's obviously good points too. Like, we would just obviously the goal of a state, whether or not, is to make the lives of people as best as possible. And I agree that it can't all be the state making all the choices. But obviously, we've also talked about the limits of leaving it completely to the free market. And I think it was a good conversation. We went very, very long.
Yeah.
So we're going to end it there. So thank you.
No, I would just wanted to say thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you.